It's 6:57. Welcome, everybody. We're going to start in 3 minutes. Can everyone hear me? Are we good? Okay.
Trying to keep every drop of water we can into this reservoir.
Hello.
Give us 1 minute. We'll start in 1 minute.
So now I can get Hi, everybody. We are getting the musicians lined up. I want to do a quick sound check. Everybody give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay, please. Fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. The musicians will be starting momentarily. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, to the 55 years of fabulous celebrating the women in the arts. First up, we have Rabbi Michael Weinstein from Temple Israel to give the invocation.
Our Torah teaches of the book of Exodus. I've singled out by my name, Bezalel. I have endowed him with a divine spirit of skill, ability, and knowledge in every kind of craft to make designs, to work in every kind of craft. Moreover, I've assigned to him. And I have also granted skill to all who are skillful, that they may make everything that I have commanded you. Moses then called on every skilled person whom the Lord had endowed with skill, everyone who excelled in ability to undertake the task and carry it out. They took over. All the gifts that the Israelites had brought, all the artisans who had engaged in the tasks, came each from the task upon which they were engaged. Tonight, we honor the skilled Jewish artisans, women in their craft. The Sherwin Museum of Jewish Art is a gem on the crown that is our Tulsa, a gem which has been so skillfully crafted at the heart of Jewish Tulsa for the past 55 years. For 55 years, the Sherwin Museum has fruitfully served in friendship and partnership with artists of all crafts and women of all backgrounds. For decades, the Jewish Museum has sought to preserve and promote Jewish heritage, culture, and history through art and education to the greater Tulsa community. In this time of community, let us not forget those who laid the groundwork of our sharing the story of the Jewish people here in Tulsa. This evening, may we be enriched through the arts, music, poetry, and words, and fine art through the medium of acrylics. May the enriched creativity which shines from our Jewish museum highlight the bright Jewish Tulsa future, once shown to those trailblazers of our community. And if I could, in honoring 55 years and fabulous, celebrating the women in the arts, to women of the arts and all women in service to the Jewish life, you sustain and nourish us with sacred wisdom, traditions of our people, teaching Torah to us and our children. May God bless you and keep you. You work alongside us, inspiring us to bring the light of justice and compassion to God's broken world. May God's face shine upon you, and may God always be gracious to you. To bear witness to our lives and accompany us on our journey through your creativity and innovative lens. You help us elevate our consciousness and search for God's presence in our lives. For your dedication to our Tulsa Jewish community, May God lift your hearts and grant you wholeness, fulfillment, and peace. May this night of celebration bring you shalem, completeness. May our joy in this hour raise you up, continuing to inspire you in the service of Jewish life and the Jewish people. We thank you, we honor you with a toast. L'chaim.
Thank you, Rabbi Weinstein, for the beautiful invocation. Welcome to our anniversary gala. I hope you are enjoying your delicious meal prepared by Kate and Tuck Curran. Tonight, we come together to celebrate 55 fabulous years of the Sherwin Miller Museum of Jewish Art. We pay tribute to this organization and its founders who dreamed what might be possible. Their passion, imagination, and vision that created this museum still serve as a catalyst for what it has grown to be today. On behalf of the Board of Trustees, I want to thank you for sharing in this incredible evening as we commemorate 55 years and fabulous celebrating women in the arts. Because of you and your generous support and dedication to our organization, we continue to fulfill our mission. I would like to introduce Tracy Hurst Woods, who will provide details of our live auction this evening.
Good evening, everyone. Rebecca Josky provided a one-of-a-kind art experience that the ladies in the community participated in with pure excitement. The Jewish Federation of Tulsa was the perfect backdrop for the creation of these unique pieces. Each participant was blindfolded and given the freedom to imagine the art they wished to create. Using acrylic paint along with all the tools necessary to fulfill their vision, the final pieces are an absolute wonder of imagination and creativity. The two pieces for auction tonight are Untitled 1, a 36-inch by 36-inch, and Untitled 3, a 34-inch by 51-inch. Both starting bids are $50. Those wishing to bid on one of these two pieces, please type in the Zoom chat to everyone, either Untitled 1, then the bid amount, or Untitled 3, then the bid amount. Please make the increases by $15 or higher of the last bid. The highest bidder, right before tonight's benediction, on each piece will win the auction. There are two other pieces that will be on display at the museum, and they will be available to purchase in November. We will show them later in the evening. You can now start bidding. Up next is the musical video tour of the museum's new women's art exhibit. Enjoy.
Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Kol hanshama tehallel, hallelujah, hallelujah. Kol hanshama tehallel. Hallelujah, hallelujah. time to party!
This is a big day, this is a fun day, this is a day to celebrate. This is a big day, this is a fun day, this is a day to celebrate. This is a big day, this is a fun day, this is a day to celebrate. Seaman, seaman, tow. Mazel, mazel, tow.
Mazel tov.
Seaman, seaman, tow.
Seaman tov.
Mazel, mazel, tow.
Mazel tov.
Celebration,
This is your moment.
dancing together. Mazel, mazel, tow.
Let's have a party. Everybody sing.
Mazel, mazel, tow. This is a big day, this is a fun day, this is a day to celebrate. This is a big day, this is a fun day, this is a day to celebrate. Seaman, seaman, tow.
Seaman tov.
Mazel, mazel, tow.
Mazel tov.
Seaman, seaman, tow.
Seaman tov.
Mazel, mazel, tow.
Mazel tov.
Celebration,
This is your moment.
dancing together. Mazel, mazel, tow.
Let's have a party. Everybody sing.
Mazel, mazel, tow. Havana, shira, shir, hallelujah. Havana, shira, shir, shalom. Havana, shira, shir, hallelujah. Havana, shira, shir, shalom. Ale, ale, be'arko ha'olam. Ale, ale, be'arko ha'olam. Havana, shira, shir, hallelujah. Havana, shira, shir, shalom. Havana, shira, shir, hallelujah. Havana, shira, shir, shalom. Ale, ale, be'arko ha'olam. Ale, ale, be'arko ha'olam. This is a big day, this is a fun day, this is a day to celebrate. This is a big day, this is a fun day, this is a day to celebrate. This is a big day, this is a fun day, this is a day to celebrate. This is a big day, this is a fun day, this is a day to celebrate.
Whew, that was awesome. So please come by the museum to see it in person. Tours are with Greg Falconetti, can help you with tours, or you can come by the museum anytime during our open 7 days a week to come and see that exhibit. It's amazing. So this evening, we are honoring also the legacy of Catherine Penson Miller. Catherine decided to pursue her deep interest in her father's Jewish heritage at the synagogue in Mexico City, where she met Tulsa's own Sherwin Miller, the first curator of the SMMJA in the mid-1960s. The two married in 1978. Catherine was destined for greatness and became the first female bank director in Mexico. She worked at the Bank of Brazil in Mexico until she and Sherwin retired to pursue their love of travel. Catherine lived in so many places growing up, she became great at learning languages and was fluent in Spanish, Portuguese, English, German, and French. After Sherwin died in 1998, Catherine decided to fulfill his dream of having a permanent home in Tulsa, Oklahoma, honoring her husband's love of Jewish art. The Fenster Santon Cultural Center became the Sherwin Miller Museum of Jewish Art with the complete trust and support of the Tulsa Jewish community. She visited the museum annually until the pandemic. Catherine passed away on January 5th, 2021, and is buried with her beloved Sherwin in Mexico City. Catherine made sure her and Sherwin's legacy continues on in Tulsa and named the museum as one of her beneficiaries. Collecting and showcasing fine art was her passion. She mentioned this every time we spoke on the phone. So in her honor, we present to her niece, BJ Tulsis, the Sherwin Miller Museum of Jewish Art Gallery dedication of the Catherine Penson Miller Fine Art Gallery in loving memory of Catherine Penson Miller on this day, Sunday, October 24th, 2021. And I believe we have BJ in hand tonight.
Hello.
Hello.
I wish I was really there in person. Thank you very, very much. She was larger than life, and to those of us who know her and love her, she always will be. Thank you, thank you. Now I'm gonna cry.
Thank you, BJ.
Thank you, Tracy.
So bidding is still going on. We have piece 1 that I believe is at $75, and piece 3 that is at $300 or $100. Sorry. So bidding is still going on until the benediction. So please continue bidding and raise some money for the Sherwin Miller Museum. And now I introduce Nancy Woloff, the chair of the gala this year.
Welcome, everyone. It's such a pleasure to see so many of you zooming in and joining us for a fun evening of good food. Thanks to Bryna Reinstein for organizing your meal with Kate and Tuck Curran. And thanks to Third Floor Design of TU for their efforts in helping to design a wonderful invitation. Also, thanks go to Catherine Frame and Laurie Berman for our program. Rebecca Josky for her wonderful work, our interactive art project that you will see later and that you are already bidding on, and for the wonderful music by the Mosaic Duo. Thank you also goes to our museum committee for this event. Our fearless leader, Tracy Hurst Woods, with her staff, Michael Yance, Charles Taylor, and Gregory Falconetti. Without these 4 people, we would not be here tonight. Last, but certainly not least, I want to thank all the people in the community who shared their art for this fabulous exhibit. Lynn Schusterman, George Singer, the family of Rita and Don Newman, family of Donna Matlitz, Ronnie Horn, Sally Mann, Rebecca Josky, Rita Singer, Mark Weiss, and Lisa Goldfarb. Please, please make an appointment with Greg to see our exhibit and everything else wonderful we have in our museum. Erica Meitner. Erica is a poet. She was born and raised in Queens and Long Island, New York. Erica is a first-generation American. Her father is from Israel and her mother was born in a refugee camp in Germany, which is where her maternal grandparents settled after surviving the Holocaust. She is currently a professor of English at Virginia Tech, where she directs the MFA and undergraduate programs in creative writing. NPR Books has said Erica is known for what's called documentary poetry, which combines some journalistic work of the reporter and the subjective renderings of the poet. The Jewish Book Council said Erica taps into national conversations on topics including motherhood, infertility, terrorism, Judaism, school shootings, and 2016 election and race. The poems The poems feel straightforward in a way that adds to their urgency. Her newest collection, Holy Moly, Carry Me, transports readers into the heart of Southern Appalachia, its highways, its strip malls, its fragility and danger, as the speaker wrestles with racial tensions, religious identity, gun violence, raising children, and the anxieties of life in the 21st century. With a refusal to settle for easy answers, Meitner's poems embrace life in an increasingly fractured society, and they never stop asking what it means to love thy neighbor as ourselves. Her Holy Moly, Carry Me displays a sense of urgency informed by parenthood in this strange and particularly turbulent American moment. Her poetry and prose have been, poetry and prose have been included in Best American Poetry. Starting today, 100 poems for Obama's first 100 days and Best African American Essays. Meitner also creates larger scale documentary photo text projects on urban environments, including This Is Not a Requiem for Detroit and RNC CLE, both commissioned by the public and published in the Virginia Quarterly Review. Erica attended Dartmouth College, Hebrew University, and the University of Virginia, where she received her MFA in creative writing as a Henry Hoynes Fellow and her MA in religious studies at a Morgenstern Fellow in Jewish Studies. She also was a US-UK Fulbright Distinguished Scholar in Creative Writing. I would have to say her most recent award was for her 2021 Poetry Society of American Cecil Hemley Memorial. And now, just a bit of fun information. Erica has worked as a dating columnist, an office temp, a Hebrew school instructor, a computer programmer, systems consultant, lifeguard, a documentary film production assistant, and middle school teacher in the New York Public Schools. I don't know about you, but I'm exhausted by all Erica has done. And believe me, there is so much more. It is time to introduce her and hear in her own words who she is. So without further ado, may I introduce to you our esteemed guest speaker, Erica Meitner. Please give her a warm welcome.
Thank you so much, Nancy. That was such a beautiful introduction. Can everybody hear me okay? Great, thank you. I appreciate the thumbs up. I want to thank Tracy, who helped coordinate my visit. I am so glad to be joining you all here on Zoom. I'm sorry we're not together physically, but I'm so delighted to be helping you celebrate 55 years of the Sherwin Miller Museum of Jewish Art by honoring women in the arts. So as you know by Nancy's introduction, and I want to talk about a little bit of some of the stuff that she said. I'm a poet and I'm the author of 5 books of poems. I have a 6th book coming out in April. And while all of my books are unique, the threads of feminism, Judaism, and women's stories run through all of them. Nancy told you a little bit about my family background. So I'm the daughter of a refugee and an immigrant. My mother was born in a DP camp, a displaced persons camp, after my grandparents were liberated from Auschwitz. They survived 5 concentration camps between them. And I think one of the things, in addition to me being a first generation American, that I always find inspiring is that I come from a really long line of strong women in my family who managed to save the other members of their family during the Shoah. I've not only been inspired by my grandmothers and their survival strategies and fortitude, but also by my Jewish poetry foremothers, Grace Paley, Muriel Rukeyser, Adrienne Rich, Marge Piercy, Hannah Block, Alicia Ostriker, and many other Jewish female artists who speak truth to power and engage in struggles for social justice and emotional honesty. These women have taught me over and over that poetry is a vital, still relevant vehicle for women's experiences, and that our stories and words have worth whether it's writing about our lives within larger historical contexts or plumbing our more quotidian and everyday experiences, whether it's shopping at Target, taking care of a sick kid, or working our day jobs. And so the first poem I'm going to read is actually a pandemic poem, and it speaks to our current moment. I wrote it over the summer when many of us were first able to kind of come together and come out of our shells. But my poems are going to cover a wide range of subject materials, stuff about my maternal grandmother, about the Holocaust, about parenting, about Yiddish, about global warming, and about political protest. So I'm excited to be with you all. This first poem is called To Gather Together. It is not yet after the pandemic, but most of us have bared our faces in public. Most of us are a little haptic, though we remain somewhat wary of strangers merging in enclosures. And what does it mean to gather, to take up from a resting place? We are so tired. We are uncovered and mustering strength. Never mind my mother's post-stroke slurred speech and vertigo, her ear crystals misaligned, her neck brace. We are survivors of the panic wars. We are reaching new conclusions intuitively from inferences about hugging. My radar is broken. I'm not sure where to put all my limbs. When they're tangled with yours, it's not a problem. Your failing configurations of attention, my bad knees. To draw fabric into puckers, pleated pants, rumpled sheets, your fingers hooked in my underpants, and we bring together all the parts of ourselves to embrace, haul in our bodies, to harvest like clusters of ripened cherry tomatoes, still warm from the sun. Forget the kale, stripped bare by bright green cabbage worms congregating on thick stems. To summon everyone back to this abundant and skeletal planet after we've jettisoned the billionaires into space, we celebrate the launch with tiny coupes of champagne. To throw open the doors and host guests and board packed planes where everyone is cranked and cranky about proximity still. But look at the skyline, clutches of buildings reaching for billows of clouds, to assemble in a sequence for binding, somewhere past contact tracing. Gather is a transitive verb. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and I want to talk about sort of how and why some of the reasons I became a poet came about. So one of the things about my family that was sort of interesting and not unusual for a family of survivors is that my grandmother really didn't talk about what had happened to her during the war. She would tell me when I was really little that the numbers on her arm were her phone number, so they were there so she wouldn't forget it. And the way I learned about what had happened during the Holocaust as a kid was through literature, through reading. And it wasn't until the Fortunoff archives at Yale and the Steven Spielberg's archive started sending people out to interview survivors that I really found out what had happened to her during the war. And so that wasn't until she was in her 70s. And so this is a little tiny poem about one of her experiences. 1944. My grandmother made holes in hand grenades to leave Bergen-Belsen, each dark night shift. Burnt out bulbs beneath the canopy of forest, bare-shouldered trees like the thinnest trip wires, the name of the unnamed over and over, hollow bones scraping the space nothing could reach. What would you place in her outstretched hands? My grandmother taught me a lot of what I know about parenting. And I think as a native New Yorker who lives currently in rural Southwest Virginia, which is a predominantly Christian area in the mountains, I'm about 30 miles from the West Virginia border. One of the revelations to me that was so strange was that my child wasn't going to be a New Yorker. And there's like a little bit of a horror in that to me. And so this is a poem called Diaspora, about a time when I took him back to visit my parents and we were on the subway together. And he was little and having like one of his first experiences surrounded by different kinds of people on the subway. Diaspora. I am riding the F train to Brooklyn with my son, who is Appalachian as much as anything, who is 6 and does not notice the Hasidic women reading Tehillim on their way home, praying psalms from worn leather-bound Cedarim, moving their lips past Broadway, 2nd Avenue, Delancey, and he would not know to identify them by their below-the-knee skirts, the filled-in parts on their shadels where scalps should be visible, or the Brighton beach men in gray fedoras with threatening hand tattoos speaking Russian, the occasional wondrous mosaic murals or regular green and white tiles spelling station names, Bergen Street, Carroll Street, Smith and 9th Street, my son discovering he can see his own reflection in the windows of the cars when they plunge into dark tunnels while the women's lips keep moving. And I want to tell him, I know they're kind, though I know to say this is reductive or offensive, even if I might say it too about the bleach blonde with the septum ring or the old Russian mobsters. So when he says it's hard to believe that you got off here every day, I agree. And think of all the times I climbed the station stairs or felt the give of metal turnstiles on my hips, the jangle of apartment keys or click of my own heels on pavement after a night out too late, the car service guys playing dominoes on overturned crates outside the bodega who didn't look up, and the way the trains still vibrate beneath the surface with exactly the same frequency they always did, blowing hot air through the grates, rattling me to the bone with foreboding joy. And I want to tell him, I know this exact moment, the one where you finally learn the contours of your own face, its beauty as it hurtles through darkness. So this is a poem that I'm going to read next that has Yiddish in it, but you don't need to know any Yiddish. I translate everything I say in Yiddish immediately after. One of the things that happened when my grandmother passed away is she kind of took the language of Yiddish with her, because my mother is a Yiddish speaker, but she had no one to speak it with. And so this kind of thinks about what happens when we lose a language. And it takes place at my grandmother's unveiling in New Jersey, at a cemetery in New Jersey. And I think the only other thing you need to know about this poem is that my sister is a rabbi. And so she makes a cameo in here. Yiddish land. The people who sang to their children in Yiddish and worked in Yiddish and made love in Yiddish are nearly all gone. Phantasmic, Haim, Der May kommt schon an, the month of May has arrived. At the cemetery, my aunt has already draped my grandmother's half of the tombstone with a white sheet. The fabric is tacked to the polished granite by gray and brown rocks lifted from my grandfather's side of the plot. He's been gone over 25 years. We are in Beth Israel Cemetery, Block 50, Woodbridge, New Jersey, for the unveiling, and the sky is like lead. We are in my grandmother's shtetl in Poland, but everyone is dead. The Fraternal Order of Bendin Sosnowitcher Sick and Benevolent Society has kept these plots faithfully next to their Holocaust memorial, gray stone archway topped with a menorah and a curse. Pour out thy wrath upon the Nazis and the wicked Germans, for they have destroyed the seed of Jacob. May the Almighty avenge their blood. Great is our sorrow, and no consolation is to be found. My sister, in her cardboard kippah, opens her prayer book, a special edition she borrowed from rabbinical school, and begins to read in Aramaic. Not one of us can bring ourselves to add anything to the fixed liturgy. My son is squatting at the next grave over, collecting decorative stones from the Glickstein's double plot. We eat yellow sponge cake and drink small cups of brandy to celebrate my grandmother's life. We are no longer mourners, says Jewish law. Can we tell this story in Yiddish? Put the words in the right places? My son cracks a plastic cup until it's shredded to strips, looks like a clear spider, sounds like an error. When my sister finally pulls back the sheet, all the things my grandmother was barely fit on the face of the marker. A year ago at the funeral, her friend Goldie told me she was strong like steel, soft like butter. Women like that, they don't make anymore. My mother tries to show my grandmother, now this gray marker, my son, how he's grown, but he squirms from her arms. Ihre Gewure eat Nitzu beschreiben. Her strength was beyond description. The people who sang to their children in Yiddish and admonished them in Yiddish are nearly all gone. Whole vanished towns that exist now only in books, their maps drawn entirely by heart. This unknown continent, this language of nowhere, these stones from a land that never was. Der May kommt schon an, the month of May has arrived. Der Wind voyet, the wind howls, says I'm not a stranger anywhere. On the stones, we write all we remember, but we are poor guardians of memory. Can you say it in Yiddish? Can you bless us? So this is a poem about global warming a little bit and some other stuff. And it takes place in Florida on the beach. It has a quote in it from Holocaust survivors that comes from this amazing movie that was made in 1986. It's a documentary called A Be Gesund, As Long As You're Well, by a filmmaker named Gabe Locke. And I've been doing a documentary poetry project for the past 4 years on sea level rise and architecture and communities in Southern Florida. So this is a poem that kind of comes out of that project. And I know Nancy had talked a little bit about documentary poetry. It's gonna be all right, promises the sound of the tide coming in. Never mind the no swim advisory, the sidewalks and parking lots strewn with yellow and black crime scene markers on the regular, the reappearing swastikas, or the fact that a quarter of all humanity will run out of water by 2030. I have been invited to the beach during the eschaton, where piles of sandbags prop up crumbling dunes, where nests of endangered loggerheads are tended to by tender volunteers, where a notice posted on the public boardwalk says visitors are urged not to wade or engage in water recreation until the enterococcus warning is lifted. These days, I find myself Googling end times habitually, and the results mention world events and climax, but they don't mean what happens when we touch ourselves or each other, often on screen. They mean an ingathering of exiles, a time of transformation or redemption, rendering all of our own poor decisions moot. I stay alert to wonders and signs. When I was running last week, a black snake at least 4 feet long slithered off the road into the dusk, and then a double rainbow so bright vaulted across the sky. I didn't know what to do except attempt to capture both with my phone. In case covenant, in case end of an epic. We try to warn ourselves every chance we get about this dangerous moment. But I was raised by refugees trained in the art of hypervigilance. You don't need to tell me anything. On a wall at a local museum, there's a movie rolling of Holocaust survivors, filmed 36 years ago, the last Yiddish generation sunning themselves on South Beach. They say, don't be afraid. If we don't say anything, no one will ever know what happened. I was 24 months in the bushes in hiding. I was laying 3 days among the dead in the wagons. We walked around like our own shadows. When I came over, I didn't have nothing. Here I'm alive and I love it. They are singing, talking, sewing, playing cards, doing aerobics on the beach, arguing and feeding pigeons crumbs of bread, reading or napping on park benches, dancing with each other on hotel porches, the women often in pairs. Everything blows through, even the lightning breaking open thick clouds on the horizon. If I were to describe the waves here to a landlocked friend or lover, I'd say they're a roar or a shush or a breath. I am alive. There is nothing I can say to comfort us. So the last poem I'm going to read this evening is a protest poem about me being literally at a protest. One of the things that Nancy had mentioned is I did my graduate work at University of Virginia. And so I lived in Charlottesville for many years and actually taught the bar mitzvah class there as my second job when I was in grad school. And so I was very close with the Jewish community there. And when neo-Nazis essentially marched through Charlottesville, it was something that impacted me very emotionally. And so that's referenced in here. And this protest was about immigration and unaccompanied minors. And this was a large group protest outside of my congressman's office. And being the child of a refugee, it's an issue I feel pretty strongly about. Thank you for listening to all my poems, everyone. Light sensitive puzzle piece. At the protest where everyone was outraged about children in cages, a guy who looked vaguely like Jesus was holding a Keep Families Together sign, and a woman who wanted to speak was holding a megaphone, then said, "I've never used one of these things. How does it work?" And her friend with the Love Thy Neighbor No Exception sign said, "Hold it closer to your mouth." And she did. And while she was speaking, pickups drove by with enormous flags. Pickups drove by blasting aggressive country, God bless the USA. And I couldn't stop looking at Protest Jesus's work boots, his cut off homemade tank top. I was holding a sign sharpied on the back of a pizza box from 4 protests ago that said "Child of a Refugee" with a red arrow pointing to me. And I stood near 3 women with small cages for rabbits, birds, gerbils that each held dolls. One was a Cabbage Patch Kid with blonde braids, since protest as mixed media sculpture is a thing now, even in Appalachia. And there was a toddler wearing a Superman shirt, holding a rainbow Superman was a refugee poster, and his father was holding him on his shoulders. Some nights when it was late, and my sons were small and asleep in their beds, I'd turn off all the lights in the house and suddenly the sound of a train or a cow or cricket, something moving and alive from their puzzles, would speak when you shifted a piece off or put one back on. This inanimate thing made animate by light would utter ghost sounds. The reporter from the local paper asked me why I was there on the sidewalk. So I told her about my mother and the DP camps. I told her only a small part of the story, but she still looked shocked. To hold is to bear the weight of a person or thing, to grasp or carry or support with our arms, to embrace someone, to keep or detain someone. There's the hold of a ship or remaining secure and intact in a position, to maintain a connection until the person on the phone line is free to speak. To have in your possession the act of grasping something, a degree of power or control. The last Shoah survivors are nearly gone, so they've made holograms to tell their stories to school children and museum visitors. But it's not the same. We respond to the sound of an actual human voice attached to a body, which means when the next woman with the megaphone in an ecumenical collar starts to read the last 4 lines of Emma Lazarus's The New Colossus, there's not a dry eye on the sidewalk in front of our local congressional office. The congressman who is away, the congressman who got teary, who looked me in the eye and said that kind of persecution could only happen in Germany, when I told him my family story, refugee from Fujio to flee or escape from this to that. Our meeting was a season before Nazis marched through Charlottesville and the rabbis pulled the Torah scrolls from the building and someone was killed. And I began quizzing my sons on our full names, addresses, phone numbers. Superman, born Kal-El on the planet Krypton, was rocketed to Earth by his father, unaccompanied, alone as an infant, moments before the destruction of his planet. It was months before anger turned to panic, then to fear. And here we are, the dislodged pieces, shoulder to shoulder, light sensitive and bleeding into the deep night. Thank you.
Erica. Hi,
Hi, Nancy.
it's Nancy. I'm stunned. Your poetry is breathtaking. And there were several questions that I think you know about, but I think I'm going to skip some of them because you went over them. But I still do have a couple that I want to ask you. And one is, does each book that you have written stand on its own, or do they all come together with a similar theme?
So that's a terrific question. All of my books, I think, have certain threads that run between them, but they really are all separate projects. And so my last book, Holy Moly, Carry Me. Let me see if I have my book here.
Have it.
Put it next to me. Yes. So, oh, my weird background is getting in the way.
I know. We've all gotten one. You sent a bunch.
Yes, that's right. Okay, so Holy Moly, Carry Me. I was working with the idea that I really wanted to plumb, which is from Leviticus, you should love your neighbor as yourself. And what does that mean? And how can you do that when your neighbors are really different from you? You know, I've been living in Southern Appalachia as a Jew, as the mother of one white son and one black son. And so we're what, you know, our adoption agency would call a conspicuous family. And I teach at Virginia Tech, which had the largest mass shooting in US history in 2007. I started here in the fall right after the shootings, and we're no longer the largest mass shooting in US history. Now we're third behind Orlando and Las Vegas. And I was really trying to figure out in that book, in that project, why all my neighbors had guns, honestly. It was something I was really grappling with, but also how, you know, how we live in heterogeneous communities, and what does it really mean to love people who are really different from you? You know, my neighbors help me take care of my kids. We help each other out in emergencies, and we're different religions, we're different races, we have really different value systems. And that was something that drove that particular book when I was writing it. And it's really different than the book before that, which was a little bit more about, less about fragility and danger and more about some of the interstitial spaces we inhabit as humans, like Walmart parking lots and supermarkets and all of these weird generic spaces where we have experiences.
Great. So do you get your ideas? I guess you get your ideas almost from where you live or how you live. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I actually get my ideas from a lot of different places. I just finished a new book where almost all of the poems are ekphrastic. So they were written off of pieces of visual art that I encountered either in museums and sculpture, in museums and sculpture parks, and even on the internet when we were under lockdown. Because one of the beautiful things about the pandemic, I think that's been one of the upsides, is a lot of museums made virtual tours of their collections. Like we just saw some of that earlier. And so I was able to access art I would never be able to visit in person. So I do write a lot off of visual art and artwork. I go on the road with documentary photographers and do these larger scale projects on issues, social issues, usually in cities. And so the one I've been working on for 4 years is in Miami, has been in Miami, and the impact of sea level rise. And I also get my ideas from my own personal experiences. So most of the poems I read tonight were from my own sort of ramblings around my life and experiences.
So actually, you do a lot of research.
Yeah,
I do a lot of research on your poems, books, themes, your experience, your personal experiences from your own personal journeys. That's really where your inspiration comes from. That's what comes out in the poetry that you read, to me, anyway.
Yeah, and I'm really curious in general. And I was also trained, part of my training is in religious anthropology. So I was trained by an amazing academic named Vanessa Oakes, who's a scholar of Jewish studies and material religion. And she taught me how to do field work like an anthropologist and go into spaces and ask people about their Jewish practices. And that's the training I take with me into the world when I want to find out about different issues. And so like one project I did was I was sent by Virginia Quarterly Review to the city of Cleveland during the Republican National Convention to interview people who lived in Cleveland about like what they thought about that. And it's unusual, actually, I think, for poets who people think of as introverts to be kind of out in the world interacting with people in the way that journalists do. But actually, there's a long tradition of that starting, you know, from before Walt Whitman even. But my favorite Jewish female poet who's done this is Muriel Rukeyser, who wrote tremendously about social issues and the Gauley mine disasters in West Virginia, where she went down to the trials to try to tell people what had happened down here in verse. So I think of myself as sort of in a long line of Jewish kind of activist poets.
So how do you view the contemporary landscape of poetry today?
It's such an interesting time because I've been doing this already for 25 years. I've been a poet in the world.
That's not true.
It is. I know, it's crazy. And when I started, like ironic, very detached, like emotionally detached poetry was like very in vogue, or like non-politically engaged pastoral poetry. And I've always been writing pretty narrative and often Jewish poems, sometimes like poems about childbirth and women's bodies in various ways that were not in fashion when I first started writing. My teachers like didn't really totally, the only teacher that knew what to do with me was Rita Dove, who is my teacher, and kind of sent me towards Sharon Olds and other women who are doing this kind of work. And now that's not true at all. Like now it's actually really common for contemporary poets to be politically engaged, to write more accessible work, to write more narrative work, to write occasional poems again. You know, Amanda Gorman got up at the inauguration and gave a beautiful occasional poem, and those were considered like super uncool for a while. And so I think one of the nice things about the internet is it's made poetry really accessible and really present for young people in so many different ways. And so we're seeing a really vibrant current poetry scene with lots of young people engaged in slams and recitations and all of these other things.
So that actually was a question I was going to ask you, is how the advice that you'd give a young writer for poetry, because it isn't really something I think is actually taught in schools at a very young age. It's something you probably pursue on your own and then follow it through in college or graduate school. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. I went to a high school where they only taught us there were dead poets, like not living poets.
Right.
And I happened to have a high school friend who took me into the city to see Allen Ginsberg read. And he was like the first person I had ever seen who was like a real alive poet. There's a real movement now, I think, among high school teachers who are maybe a little younger to teach living poets so that their students know that we are alive and working and not just dead. And I think that's really beautiful. And so for a young poet, I would definitely say, you know, to read as much as you can get your hands on, which is so much easier now with the internet, and Poem a Day from the Academy of American Poets and stuff that'll just show up in your inbox. And so I think we've eliminated the access problem with the internet to some extent. And Instagram and all of the social media platforms that post poems.
Just one more question. If you were to have a dinner party and you were inviting just writers or poets, dead or alive, who would they be?
That's such a great question. And it's like, I want to invite everyone. Like, I just want all of them to come. I would definitely want Allen Ginsberg to come with his bongo drums in his caftan. I think that would be amazing. I would want Muriel Rukeyser to kind of come back to us and come to dinner. I would want some contemporary Jewish novelists there too, Michael Chabon, and other people I really just love reading because of their amazing brains. Dara Horn, who just has a new book out that's really good. I could keep going, but I would fill like an entire conference hall with these writers. They're
Just a table, Erica.
Just a table, yeah. I think maybe the one other person I would have come back is Adrienne Rich, the poet. And I would want to throw in some visual artists for good measure too. You know, you don't always want to just have writers.
No, good answer. Good answer. It has been absolutely delightful to have you. And I want to meet you in person.
I know.
I'm so sorry that we didn't have the opportunity to have you here in Tulsa and meet with grade school kids, high school kids, middle school kids, to hear all your wonderful, wonderful stories. Thank you so, so much. And I'm going to extend an invitation to you to come to Tulsa one of these days.
I would love to come to Tulsa one day. So thank you, Nancy. And thank you everyone for being such a wonderful audience. This was great.
Thank you.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you both. That was a great discussion and interview. Tonight has been delightful. I want to recognize and thank Nancy Woloff, who graciously agreed to chair this year's gala. Nancy and the entire gala committee worked tirelessly in planning our celebration this evening. A special thanks to Tracy Hurst Woods, our Deputy Director of the museum, who oversees all aspects of the museum on a day-to-day basis. Every detail is given the attention it deserves to make our operation run smoothly and seamlessly. A big thank you to our dedicated and hardworking museum staff who continue to deliver remarkable exhibits that make our museum first class. Thank you to our Executive Director, Ida Nosik, for jumping right in after moving to Tulsa just a few short months ago. She wears many hats in this community, including the important executive roles she serves for our museum. I would also like to thank the Federation staff who collaborates with us in many areas, including accounting, maintenance, and programming. Our partnership with the Federation has been a huge success in no small part because of the professional staff all working together. Thank you to our volunteers and docents who work diligently throughout the year to educate and showcase our beautiful museum to the greater Tulsa community and beyond. I have deep gratitude for our board of directors and stakeholders. Without their unwavering guidance, enthusiasm, and dedication, our many museum accomplishments would not be possible. As we conclude our evening, I want to thank you for being with us to celebrate 55 years of the Sherwin Miller Museum of Jewish Art. I would also like to thank our members and patrons who loaned our museum amazing pieces of work for our Women in the Arts exhibit. Along with art pieces from our own collection, this is our newest exhibit and a must-see. It is now my pleasure to introduce Tracy, who will announce the winners of our live auction this evening.
Thank you, Angie. So I am pleased to report that tonight's two winning bids was Brian Browse for Untitled 1, the 36 by 36, And I believe it's John's iPad, which is John Stolper, I believe. Number 3, on tile number 3, the 34 by 51. Thank you so much for your bids, and I will get with you soon to pick up those items. Now I'm going to introduce the 2 other pieces that will be on display through November and are available for purchase. The first is Untitled 2, a 36-inch by 36-inch, and Untitled number 4, which is a 36-inch by 50-inch. For inquiries or to purchase, please contact the museum. 2 things are going to end tonight's gala. The first will be Rabbi Kamen of Congregation B'nai Emunah by giving the benediction, and then he will be followed by the Mosaic Duo, and they will play us out to the end of the evening. Thank you all for coming out tonight and your support of the Sherwin Miller Museum of Jewish Art.
Good evening, everyone. A word of poetry from the tradition. Eshet Chayil Mi'imtza, what a rare find is a woman of valor. She leads her community and cares for the less fortunate. She prompts good deeds and offers gentle advice. She stands up for what is right and never fails to call out injustice. She reaches out to newcomers and honors those who came before her. She builds community with an open heart and gives endlessly to the tasks at hand. She looks for the good in all and sees beauty even when it is hidden. She builds a world that promotes social change, and she changes lives through what she creates. This evening, we offer blessings and reflect on a year of strength and vitality in the work of this museum. We honor those who lead this organization with compassion and sensitivity. We gather filled with pride for what has been accomplished, pride for what will be accomplished, and pride that our museum serves as a beacon of optimism and committed purpose for our greater Tulsa community. Eshet Chayil Mi'imtza, what a rare find is a woman of valor. May this program through which we honor women in the arts remind us that we continue to be a community where women of valor show us the way to a more perfect world. So may we all be blessed, and let us all say together, Amen, Amen. Again, many thanks for being with us this evening. And it's my pleasure to invite you to visit the gallery in the days ahead, and to thank you for being with us, and to say welcome to the music.
Thank you all for coming. We'll see you next year. Thank you.